Oh, come on. I am Arnold Schwarzenegger. Everybody loves me. I have to be Mark's Max Muscle's favorite bodybuilder. Hello, everyone. Mark here. Mark's Max Muscle. And much to Arnold's dismay, no, he is not my favorite bodybuilder. And that is the aim of today's video. We're going to go through the history of this fine sport or game of ours. And I will tell you my honest opinion, my personal favorites. And it has nothing to do with how good these guys were, although it does have a little bit to do with it, I guess. And if they're a nice guy, I guess you really put them as your favorite bodybuilders, things of that nature. Arnold, I liked him. I liked him just fine. I liked Sergio Oliva as well, and he competed back then. The only guy ever to beat Arnold on the Olympia stage. So, I mean, he has to be a lot of people's favorites. Frank Zane as well, a very popular bodybuilder. But are any of those guys considered my favorite, even for that time? Probably not. Probably not. Kind of preferred your Lou Frignos and your Serge Nabres over most of those guys. And taking into consideration, I really only knew these guys from pumping iron and never really witnessed any Olympias back in the day. I believe that Franco Columbu was my very first official favorite bodybuilder. And like I said, that was just based on pumping iron alone. I knew he was perhaps the strongest guy, and I knew he was the smallest. And being a young feller, of course you take to that. Absolutely. But is he my favorite bodybuilder still? Well, officially, no. I guess if you're gonna put a name there, it will be Robbie Robinson, another guy that was featured on Pumping Iron. But I hardly remember him because they didn't really feature him all that much. And it is very strange considering his physique was unbelievable, even next to Arnie's. But could be some politics involved. Wasn't until years later, 1994 Masters Olympia, he was able to defeat big old Lou, a returning 300-pound Lou Ferrigno. And Robbie Robinson became the very first ever Masters Olympia champion. And just hearing the guy talk, I mean, what he went through, the bodybuilding back in the old days, he competed through the 80s, he brought in some excellent packages, and the guy's still in tip-top shape. So Robbie Robinson, I guess he's my favorite bodybuilder, but I say I guess because I kind of think it's immature to say one bodybuilder's your favorite, considering there was bodybuilders competing way before pumping iron that I never even heard of, like Freddie Ortiz. And I could just imagine if I was around back in the day, Freddie Ortiz would have been my favorite bodybuilder. Just a small guy. I mean, he competed back in the 60s, all through the 60s. And he never really did get that big title because, like I said, he was just a smaller guy. And if he was around nowadays, probably be 212 champion. What a big man's chest, Freddie Ortiz. And there was other guys too. I am sure I would have really liked Paul Winter. And when I do the histories of things of that nature, Paul Winter, he really sticks out to me. I mean, he had no weaknesses, wasn't missing anything. And the guy was incredible. I believe he was a NABA pro, Mr. Universe. So he did get some big titles at one point in time. So kudos to Paul Winter, one of my absolute favorites. But I guess if I had to pick a top favorite, historically favorite bodybuilder that I don't actually remember, it would probably be Bill Pearl. I mean, his story is incredible. He dominated for years, and what a physique. And what a very great fella, too, from what I understand. And like I said, it all helps. It all helps. They wouldn't be your number one favorite if they were a turkey or a jerk, things of that nature. And I guess one other thing can force you to scratch somebody off your number one position, your favorite bodybuilder, and that's winning a very controversial call, like Franco Columbu did indeed do in 1981. And I am mentioning this because, no, I don't remember any of this. I was born in 1981, for goodness sakes. But looking back historically again, Danny Padilla and Tom Platz have to be mentioned as absolutely two of my favorite bodybuilders. And that brings us to the mid-80s. Now, I do have my first memories from back then. Probably remember seeing Pumping Iron, things of that nature. Do I remember Lee Haney and his title reign? Pamphlet from time to time. Something of that nature. But one thing's for sure, I wasn't a huge fan of the bodybuilders that they were featuring in the top call-outs back then. And that's kind of a theme throughout the history of my fandom of bodybuilding. I kind of like the wolves that are climbing the hill. Guys like Brian Buchanan. What a physique. Unbelievable, guys. Unbelievable. And then there was another guy, Edward Kowak. You guys remember Edward Kowak? You guys were around back then, or you seen that? I think it was the 1988 Road to the Olympia, things of that nature. You guys know exactly what I'm saying. He had one of those old-timey, classic, great physiques, just full of blockbuster muscle. Loved Edward Kowak. And that brings us to the 90s, the mass monster era. And for those of you who were around back then, my age, things of that nature, or older, I do not even need to explain how good it was. Every one of these guys were my favorites, and I'm sure you guys were the exact same way. Of course, a few good standouts were Paul Dillette, Kevin Levrone, Lee Priest, Nasser El-Sanbati, Sean Ray, Vince Taylor, and Chris Cormier. And I know, it may come as quite a blow, quite a surprise to many of you that Flex Wheeler or Dorian Yates, two of the top bodybuilders of the 90s, are not in my top 10 list, I guess, from the 90s. They probably wouldn't be there. And I guess that was the theme, like I said, from back in the day. I never rooted for the wolf on top. And same goes with Ronnie King Coleman and Jay Cutler. During their reigns, I was not a huge fan, surprisingly. One guy that I did like, and I'm sure you guys like this big monster, this mass monster too, Marcus Arul. And no, he wasn't beating these guys. That's not what I'm saying. It's a personal list. I'm sure you guys personally like Marcus Arul just as much as I do. Is it an aesthetically pleasing physique? No. Is it a pretty physique? No. I sure do like the way he hits a most muscular pose, though, in each and every one of the mandatory shots. He can pull it off. Look at this. Is this a most muscular or a side chest? There is a third option. Does it matter? That's your third option. Look at the chest. It is blockbuster. So Marcus Arul, funny thing, I do like aesthetically pleasing bodybuilders, but he probably was my favorite bodybuilder through the early to mid 2000 range, and a little bit embarrassed to admit, I kind of fell out of bodybuilding for a while. Wasn't a huge Jay Cutler fan, to be honest with you. Love the guy now. The one guy that brought me back to the sport, the one athlete, was Phil Heath. And I know it sounds so cliche. Oh, I liked Phil Heath. But I guess the truth of the matter is, it was his dominance that I liked. I liked how he defeated Jay Cutler. Nobody could beat him. I guess if it was Kai Green winning all those titles, maybe it would be him that I was rooting for. But it was Phil Heath. He looked so good in that first year he won. And I mean, the guy, he kept knocking them out of the park. He was very, very dominant. So I guess you could say, it's fair to say, that Phil Heath is one of my favorite bodybuilders. Of course, all the while, I was probably rooting the hardest for Boo Bunder. Rooley the Beast Winkler. And I can almost guarantee there is a large percentage of my audience, my fans, my viewers, that feel exactly the same way about this great champion. Something about that front double bicep pose. Can't beat that. Can't beat that. Roly or Roly? I apologize. I like him anyway. He's good. And it is definitely hard to get through this video without mentioning Dexter the Blade Jackson. Was I a huge Dexter fan when he won his first and only Olympia title? Well, I wasn't really paying that much attention to the sport at the time, unfortunately. But I mean, those last few years, he was getting second place there. Once in 2015, Dexter the Blade Jackson. He will absolutely go down into history as being one of my favorite bodybuilders. And that is it, guys. I recently made a video on my current favorites. Nick Walker. You guys may have noticed, the ones that watched it. Nick Walker, he's my favorite current pro. There's a few of them. I like Crezo. I like Quint Beastwood. I like a few of them. And two gentlemen that I figured I would end this one off with is Tonio Burton and Good Vito Vitaly Ugolnikov. I neglected to mention either of these guys. And I did notice one of you guys commented about Good Vito. You guys know who I like. And I forgot to add Tonio and Good Vito, two of my absolute current favorites. So you can add those guys to that list. Still get Nick as my number one favorite. Yes, I like Nick Walker. You don't have to get mad at me. It's just my personal favorite. And that's why these videos are fun. There's no wrong answer. You can't tell me, oh, you don't like Robbie Robinson, Mark. He's old. He's old. Of course he is. He's still alive. That's what happens to you when you're still alive. You get old. It'll happen to you, too. Have a great one, guys.